Hi, I'm Cassie, and today I'm going to be recommending a bunch of books that have made me cry. Should I look so cheerful when I'm saying that? Should I look sad? I'm probably going to have to do like a sad thumbnail, right? That doesn't look sad. I don't know what that was. That wasn't sad though. But I'm reading like a really sad note and I'm just like, that doesn't seem sad. I don't know how to do sad. I know how to do sad when I'm sad. Think about something really sad. What's the saddest thing I can think about? Sad things. Think sad thoughts. Okay, let's try it again with sad thoughts intact. Hello, I'm Cassie, and today I'm gonna be recommending some sad books. Was that sad? Did that work? Did I do it? Okay, so let's get on with the list. I know sad books might not be for everybody, but I just love stuff that makes me cry. I don't know, there's like this weird cathartic release when you're feeling something, but you don't let it out, and then you watch a movie and it triggers you, and then you're just like, like I can't keep it in anymore. Everything I've been feeling is now exposed and sad because I watched Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and there were meatballs. Maybe it's just me with the meatball thing, but I remember crying in that movie. So the first book on my list of sad book recommendations is going to be a fan favorite, and that is Sadie. And this is a YA horror thriller, and I love this book. I would highly, highly recommend listening to this as an audiobook. And the reason behind that is because there's like this podcast element to the book, and I think it just gets delivered so much better through an auditory format. Because when I read this book, because I read this twice, so I listened to it once and then I read it physically, and when I read it physically it was still very good, but when I listened to it, I was listening to it on my commute to and from work, and I literally had to pull off on a freeway exit that I do not normally take because I had to get my car off of the road because I was crying so hard that I couldn't breathe. So definitely recommend this. This is about a girl who is investigating the murder of her little sister, and her little sister's body was found, and it's very sad, it's very traumatic. I will definitely recommend looking into the content warnings of this one because it has to deal with some really rough stuff, but this is so good. It is so good, so sad, and it's the only book that I've read by the author, but I have been meaning to like check out some of her other stuff because of how much I love this one, so I'm gonna make a point to do that this year, I think, now that I'm mentioning it here. Hold me accountable. And then next up, another one I would really recommend as an audiobook is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and this book, this is so good. This spans over the lifetime of a woman called Evelyn Hugo, who is like a movie star in her like later years, but it follows her from being a child until when she's like old. The whole story is her giving an interview to this girl who works for a magazine, and the girl doesn't know why she's chosen to give the interview to her because she's such like a famous actress person and anybody would love to interview her, but she specifically chose the girl, the main character, to tell her life story to, and that's not fully explained until the end of the book. And when that part gets explained, I fucking lost it. Like, it was such a big twist for me that I did not see coming, and there are just so many little things throughout the book. It's just so, so good. So this is about Evelyn, and it is about her 7 husbands, but it's about why she has 7 husbands, like the situation surrounding each marriage, and it also has to do with a very, very, very gay love story underneath it all between her and another woman. And it's so good, and having that as the backdrop for this story and for like the love story and for Evelyn Hugo as a character, it makes it very, very impactful, but it also still bears a lot of resemblance to things that people deal with today. Like, there are a lot of similarities between the things that Evelyn Hugo deals with and the things that people deal with who are coming out today and who are dealing with homophobic jerks today. And it's not only that too, like there's a lot of other stuff that happens in the story, and it's so good. It's really, really good. I'm actually planning on rereading this one soon. I also read Daisy Jones and the Six, which did make me cry, but not as hard, and I reread that one recently, so I'm excited to be rereading Evelyn Hugo probably in the next month or so. Next on the list, we have A Psalm for the Wild Built, and this is about a tea monk who lives in a world where they had robots, but then the robots all just like up and decided to leave and let the humans fend for themselves because they didn't want any part of it anymore. And this is like kind of like a quiet, cozy sort of fantasy book, but there's a lot of stuff in this about acceptance and about like not knowing where you're going in life, and about how even when you think you know where you're going in life, sometimes you get there and you're like, fuck, this is not where I thought I would be or where I wanted to be. Even thinking about now, like I'm starting to get emotional, so you can tell, like, it's really important. It's a really sweet book, and I really liked it, so yeah. Can you see this? I literally had to like step away and stop talking because I started tearing up. The thing is, this book too, it's not even like a sad book. I do recognize that for some of these recommendations, I read the books at a time where I was maybe more susceptible to crying in general. Maybe something was going on during my life. Maybe it was a particular time of the month where I was closer and easier to crying than normal. Whatever the reason may be, yeah, this one, it's a good book. I loved it. It's so short too, but it's very sweet. And it's part of like a series. So there's a second book that actually already came out and that I am very excited to be reading. I don't know if it's gonna hit me the same way the first one did, because the first one, again, just had like specific messaging that I think I really needed to hear at the time or read at the time. But yeah, definitely recommend. We have another one that is another fan favorite, And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer. This is another novella, very short. I think this one's under 100 pages probably. And this is about an old man who has dementia and is telling a story of his life to his grandson. And it has to do with like the grandfather, it has to do with the grandfather's son, so the grandson's father, and it has to do with the grandson. And it just has to do with their whole family. It's very sweet, but it's so sad. This one will be very hard to read if you have a family member who's suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's or anything like that. My mom has Alzheimer's, so for me, this felt very personal. And I think if that is the case for you as well, you might want to head into this with just a little bit of caution, just because it can be difficult. And I don't want, like, while this is a list about books that'll make you cry, I do believe that you should go into some things with a little bit more care. So make sure you take care of yourself if that's the case for you. And then we actually have a book that I read recently, which is Dear Medusa. And this isn't even out yet, so I contemplated whether or not I should add this to the list, but it made me cry, so I had to include it. I got an advanced copy of this one. I only just read it recently and I only read it digitally, but the second it comes out in hardcover or paperback or whatever, I'm going to buy it because I want to read it again so bad, and I want to physically mark it up and like annotate it. This is about a high school girl who's being abused by one of her teachers, and it's very, very hard hitting. It's very heavy. It has to do with that, but it also has to do mostly with how she's dealing with it. So the things she does that other people view her as less of a perfect victim for, things that a lot of people do when they experience what she's experiencing. So historically, when somebody is abused in that way, they can sometimes act out in a way that makes them a lot more promiscuous, for example. And that can be for various reasons. One of the reasons can be because they feel like this gives them control over something that they did not have control over in a previous situation, whether that situation's ongoing or not. So this book was very, very personal to me. It was very important for me. I think there are so many things in here about surviving bad things and not letting the bad things that have happened to you shape who you become, that could be very important for a lot of people to read. I think if I had read this book when I was a teenager, it would have been so important. It would have been so useful, just in the way that it can make people who are dealing with really difficult things feel less alone and alienated. So yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention, this one is told in verse. So that's a really important part of this book that I completely blanked over just because I was so focused on why it made me cry. But this is a novel told in verse. So if that's your thing, definitely recommend. If that's not your thing, or if you're not sure, I would still recommend it because it's so good, so good. And then the last book we have is actually a recent release. So this came out in January, and this is one of the Wayward Children books, Lost in the Moment and Found. And this is like book 8, I think, in the series. So I don't want you to hear that and then just be like, no. I would recommend the whole series. They're very short, every single book, but a lot of them do stand alone as well, and you only kind of like need bare knowledge of how the world works to read it. In this one, you don't really need a lot of prior knowledge because this one really just has to do with the girl Ancy and what happens to her and her door and her little world that she discovers and her family life and stuff like that. So in the beginning of this one, something really sad happens to her, and that made me tear up. And then it just got worse and worse and worse for her. And I felt so bad because there are so many times in my life where I feel like one thing has happened that was really bad and like broke me, and then things just kept happening. Like things just kept piling on, and at some point you're just like, how am I withstanding this much stuff? Like, how am I dealing? Like, how am I still coping? And I feel like there were moments of that for her. and I really just related to her. I think you probably will want to look into content warnings for the stuff that Nancy deals with at home, but I will say that it's not too graphic. There's even an author's note at the beginning of the book reassuring people that Nancy escapes her house before certain things can happen to her, which I think is a very important note to know going into that, because there can be a lot of anxiety and a lot of bad feelings surrounding not knowing what might happen in this particular situation. I know this is all kind of vague, but yeah, just look into the content warnings. This is so good. It's not my favorite book in the Wayward Children series, but it is the one that made me cry the most, so had to include it on the list. Okay, so there you have it. This is 6 books that have made me cry, sob, actually, like pretty much ugly cry. Like 2 of these I've had to pull off the road and just sit and cry when I finish them because the endings got me so bad. So yeah, if you like to cry, these may be your jam. Let me know if these have also made you cry. Let me know if you have any other book recommendations that you would give me that would make me cry, because I would love that. Thanks for hanging out with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you in my next video. Bye.